Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Soul-u-tions podcast. And today I have the biggest treat in store for you. So, a special guest, someone who is an expert coaching the 20-somethings. So, if you are a 20-something who listens, or if you have a child or a grandchild who's in their 20s, I definitely want you to pass this episode around to all of those people that you love. So I'm going to tell you that on the front end so you can be thinking about it while you're listening to who needs to hear this episode. And I think the most important person who needs to hear this episode is you. So take a listen to the intro and I'll meet you on the other side.
Einstein said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." Most everyone in the world is solving their problems the wrong way. Our problems come from our thinking, and we can solve them with our thinking. So, whether you're at your lowest, just trying to grow, or whether you are trying to sustain growth over your lifetime, join us as we push the boundaries of our current thinking and redefine how we find Soul-u-tions.
And the strength and the love and the smiles and the laughter of friends and family. Add it up, you'll find no limit to the possibilities.
Today I have Elizabeth Huggins Elliott here in the studio.
It's been a long time since I've heard that. Thank you.
You're welcome. You got to give a little hometown.
Give me a little context to being back home.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And so as I have shared with you in the introduction, Elizabeth is a life coach like I am. And she does I guess you tell everybody, Elizabeth, what you love to do, like why you love the 20s and what you love to do.
I think that it's beautiful when you really figure out what you're here on this planet to do and where your expertise is. And that I have always been drawn to that decade. I think there's so much that happens in your 20s, and it can really define the trajectory of the rest of your life. And originally, I worked through the Episcopal Church Helping in the Journey to Adulthood program, and then through a dear friend, Miss Tara Simkins.
And
an excellent coach. Tara was my first coach, so this is a full circle moment for me. I became certified, and everyone that I talked to initially was like, when I said I want to help the 20s, there was never any question. That was just like, this is what I know. This is where I see some real change can happen. And I do believe that some skills and some tools that if you learn early really changes the rest of your life. And more people said to me, I wish that I had had a coach when I was in my 20s.
Yes.
And I still hear that 7, 8 years later when I say, I coached the 20s, and they'll say, I needed one then. Or I know someone in their 20s who could really use one.
Yes.
So.
All right. So before we get into your best advice for people in their 20s, you mentioned something when you were just sharing that, and I wanted to kind of pull out a little bit because I think that it'd be important for our audience to hear this from you. You said something like, I love it, or I think it's so important or meaningful when you figure out that thing that you are on this earth to do. And this being that thing for you is being a coach for people in their 20s. But I wanted to know if you would share for our listeners, what that looked like for you in discerning what your special thing is on this earth, how that journey looked for you, what it has meant for you. Because I think no matter where anyone is in their life, right, that's always what we want to do. We want to kind of find that. And so many people get stuck in never quite figuring it out. So I thought maybe you could share that.
Such a great question. And I'll tell you, it wasn't just, I decided and this was it.
Yeah.
It was always like a yearning or an inkling inside, or there were times when even, right out of college, I started working in the church, and I just felt like when I was in with people in this emerging adult pattern, and I was side by side and journeying along with them, I just felt an ease, and I felt just a rightness, if there's any other way of putting it. But, life went on, and I didn't initially do that. I was in my own 20s.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
So I went on and did other things, and
like
I worked for a title company. I did closings out in Wyoming.
Real estate
closings based on just a lifetime of working from my father's practice. Then I went on and became a real estate agent. But I always had this other, if I could do anything, I would do this other thing. I would always have that yearning, that calling. And so I would find little outlets for it. Like along that time, I mentored the 20-somethings at St. John's Church in Jackson, Wyoming.
How about that?
And that was and I could find myself putting more energy into that than I would into my real estate practice. And it eventually, I finally quieted the other noises that said, you should do this, or what about this? And all of the obstacles, I finally just said, and it really was in working with you and learning how to stop just reacting to life, and then just saying, hey, wait a minute, listening to that intuition. And it's like, what brings me joy?
Yeah.
Because that's what I think that's why we're here.
I think it is why we're here. And I do think I want to highlight this for people, because what you're saying is, it wasn't that. When I was born, my first thought was, this is what I'm going to do.
Wouldn't that be so easy?
Wouldn't that be really easy? Because I do think a lot of people feel like something might be wrong with them, that they don't know that, or at least I've also heard that a lot too. I remember watching when Oprah about 10 years ago did this huge tour with speakers like Brene Brown and Liz Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. I remember Liz talked about in an interview after they did that tour that she would go around, and it was like, finding your purpose, and everybody has a purpose, and this and this and this. And then someone wrote into her one day and said, I don't know my purpose, and I feel like I'm failing at life because I don't know, because I hear everybody say that you should have it. And so I remember Liz saying in this interview, she goes, I rethought through that. And so now I want people to know that what that really looks like. So you don't think something's wrong with me, I must be missing something, I don't know what that thing is. In listening to you and just taking a second to break it down and reflect back for people who are listening, you're saying, when I was 25, you went out, first of all, you went out west. And I just want to applaud that, because being a woman, you grew up in Augusta, Georgia.
Yes.
Your family was here. For generations. Your mother's family has been here for generations. And you went to Sewanee, University of the South, and Tennessee, and then you graduate from college and you go out to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I mean, that's courageous. That has tells me something about your spirit there that you had.
Very adventurous spirit. And I think, and very courageous.
And very courageous, right? To leave, Augusta, Georgia and say, this is what I want to do. And to tell your parents, you had to I'm guessing you had to sell your parents on the idea.
I'm still trying to sell my sweet mother that it was a good thing.
When you listen to this.
I'm just teasing.
Right?
Yes. No, I actually, and I had to be very forthright in saying, this is what I'm going to do. And maybe it's not negotiable.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
And the reason I love pulling this out of you is that, and I shared in a previous podcast, actually one that I released about like how the Soul-u-tions Labs came into being, and you're in the Soul-u-tions Labs, and not only in it, but you're my right-hand coach in it. My parents came to me when I was graduating, and I wanted to be a ballet dancer, and I couldn't quite figure out how to do that. I thought that was my life's calling, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. And they're like, well, we think you'd be great as a lawyer, and that would be a great profession for you. And they had all these reasons, and they sold me on it, and I ended up going to law school. So I just want you to know how much I appreciate the courage that you had, your 22, 3-year-old self, to know what you wanted. It may not have been like this purpose thing that, we're talking about now, but there was something within you that knew that you wanted to go someplace else, that you wanted to be far away, and you trusted it, and you honored it, and you were able to speak, speak words to power, being your parents at that age.
Right. Yep.
I couldn't figure out how to do that, or have the courage to figure out how to do it on my own. And so I just wanted you to know, I think that's a big deal.
Thank you. Yeah, it does take, and those are some of the questions in working with people in their 20s. It's not often that people in their 20s are asked the question,
what do you want to do?
What do you want to do? And I appreciate now, as a mother of 3 20-something-year-olds, I don't often ask that question either. I often find myself saying, hey, you know what you would be really good at?
Yes.
And it's not, for me, when I'm saying that, it's because I want to feel safe for them.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to know, you want to know that they're going to be able to support themselves.
Right.
That was what my parents were like.
Yes. And we think it's a loving gesture.
Yes.
And also to see something in you, because I knew you as a young attorney. You were an excellent attorney.
Right.
They weren't wrong in saying you would be great at that.
No, they weren't wrong. And it did take a lot of courage to do that, too, to be a woman at that time going into law school and all the things that I had to learn in that. So, and I guess that's the other thing, having this conversation for people to know, both parents, grandparents, and kids in their 20s, make a decision, right? There's some things you're going to learn from it, no matter what that decision is.
Exactly.
You're going to learn things that you like. You're going to learn things that you don't like. You had such a strong voice for yourself and had your own back. I probably needed to learn how to stand on my own 2 feet a little bit more, and not pleasing my parents or not needing that validation or needing that reinforcement. Neither is better than the other. They just are both and. And so I think that's an important thing for us to remind people.
Absolutely. And, the thing about going ahead and making a decision is you don't stay in that uncertainty.
Right.
You put your energy in a forward movement. And then also, and as you taught me this process, the evaluation process, you then have data and evidence to actually look at and say, okay, when I do X, Y, and Z, how do I feel? What do I think about this? And are these the results I want? And yes, okay, I may like the income that I have. Great. What's the trade-off? And it's okay, do I feel, is there that ease at the end of the day? Do I have a sense of yeah, I'm doing what I should be doing.
Right.
This feels, the only way I can really think of saying it is easy. I feel at peace within my heart in doing it. And I'm not saying every day is easy.
Right. No.
But there is a difference when you can tell when you're in your flow and when you're fighting too hard at something.
So take that away. I'm everybody who's listening, because I just heard this just within the past 2 weeks. So Elizabeth and I were both trained at the Life Coach School. So we both have the same coaching background, and we use the same coaching framework. And so part of all the alumni, we have these annual kind of continuing education courses, right? And so Brooke Castillo, who's the founder of the Life Coach School, I heard her say in in the course that came out a couple of weeks ago, as you're listening, there's a way to extract value from any situation. Like, you become a person who knows how to extract value. This is something that Elizabeth and I believe in wholeheartedly, and we coach all our clients on how to do it and how to learn how to do it. So it reminded me that on the podcast too, to remind you when you're listening, like, you're going to notice some ahas. You're going to notice some things that like, oh yeah, I really like that idea, or that makes a lot of sense, or I've never thought about that before. And instead of just writing that idea down, take it the next step further and make a to-do list item, like turn it into an action item, so that you will actually not only learn the knowledge, but you will begin to apply it yourself and see how it works for you in your life and take it the next step. So I don't know, what you just said then just reminded me to tell our listeners that they can take something that we're sharing in our conversation.
Right.
And then ask themselves, like, oh, how can I put that into action in my life? So in just thinking about what we've just talked about, I'm going to share one and then you share one. I'm thinking, oh, Elizabeth says how important it is to make a decision. And so ask yourself, like, oh, where am I not making a decision in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And what is standing in the way of me making that decision? Oftentimes people just think they need more time when the science is pretty clear. Go with your gut, like,
right.
You don't need
Or
more
that
time.
idea, there's a right decision and a wrong decision.
Exactly.
There's really only the decision you decide is right.
That's right. So think about that for yourself. Where's a decision to be made? And then you'll be able to experience the relief of making the decision. And then you'll be able to experience your brain allowing yourself to say, okay, now what's the next right step? What's the next right step?
And how to solve.
And how to solve.
Because our brains really want to create a path forward.
Yeah.
And they want to solve for these things, these goals that we have, these decisions that we make for ourselves. And they want to create that movement forward. And, it's funny, I'm glad you brought that up about listening for value and then using this information in your own life, because that's really where I see the changes happening.
Right.
Like, I listened to the Life Coach School podcast forever. Forever, I would listen to them over and over again. And I'd be like, that's so great. And I'd copy down exactly what Brooke said, but I never asked myself, where's my own wisdom here? And it was only in listening to you and listening to Brooke and saying, oh, do I agree with this? And sometimes greatest wisdom came from places I didn't agree.
Right.
Because it caused me to find out where it is, what's tracking with me and my gut. And I think that's really where conversations are so valuable with a coach.
Right.
Because they ask you these questions. That's with my clients. I'll say, oh, okay, you don't agree. Great.
Right.
Tell me why not.
Tell me why
specifically. And it's like, okay, I love knowing that about you. And this is what you want in your life. So now let's put these two things together and create an action plan for you.
And think about it. All of our lives, like, you're in school and you're being told what to think most of the time.
Sure.
Or told, like, oh, if you think this way, then, this is how you solve the problem. If it's math, right? Like, you have to do the problems this way. Or if it's writing, like, you need to write it this way. Or we're going to test you on the knowledge. And so these are the facts you need to learn. And so we trained our young people to just regurgitate back the information.
Absolutely.
And so oftentimes I will think that the power of someone in their 20s working with you or working with a coach like you is sometimes it's the first time someone has ever asked them, do you agree with this? What do you think about it? What's your take on it? Like, that could be the first time that there's ever been safe space for them to begin to figure out what they want to think and what's aligned with their values or their own wisdom, right? The first time that gets pulled out.
Right. And I think there's real value. I know, I mean, even as a parent,
yeah,
it's kind of scary to think that somebody else will ask that of your child. But the interesting thing that I'm finding is the more I ask that, really at the end of the day, these 20-somethings are more aligned with, they see a lot of their own value and their path forward. It's really not that different.
Yeah.
And if they'll say, no, I don't agree with that, and then we break that down a little bit, I'll say, okay, what part do you agree with?
Yeah.
And then when they are able to vocalize from their own reflections and their own like, well, I do see how this would be valuable. It's such a great conversation because it comes from them.
It comes from them. And then you're a person, and this is something I don't think people who've never coached before really appreciate this, because we spend a lot of time thinking about this and trying to dissect things. But you can have the same conversation as the parent, because we as coaches like, well, first of all, rule number one is, don't coach unless you have consent to coach, right?
Have you ever been given consent?
Oh, well, so my children will say, I need a mom right now, not a coach. Or I'll say, okay. Or they'll say, okay, I need a more of a coach right now versus a parent. And so that I know like what hat. And
it's probably hard if you're a parent and you're out there listening to it as a coach.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. I have had a few times that my children have said, Mom, I just need some coaching on this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm not neutral about you. I love you so much. And it's very hard for me to stay objective and hold this neutral space because I'm colored by my growing you and keeping you alive and taking you through life and showing you the way that I thought was supposed to be the right way for you. It's very hard for me to keep that out of the coaching relationship.
You and to know that, right? Like this is that wisdom that we have developed. And I do think this is one of the strengths of being a member in the Soul-u-tions Labs is that you begin to cultivate this skill set of knowing the power of being neutral on something. And that when you're in the relationship, just that understanding of like, oh, I really am biased about, I really do think there's a right way for my decision for my kid to make. But if I have started to have these conversations with my kid to be honest and say, I'm not really objective on this because I'm fully vested in a particular outcome for you. And what you're suggesting is very different. And I'm going to have to do some thinking on this and take some time. And I think about that in the Soul-u-tions Labs because we focus so much on our relationships with ourselves, with our family, with our acquaintances, strangers, people that we are having challenges with, people that we work with. Like we understand where these lines are and how to bring that vocabulary in. So what you're talking about here, going back to why sometimes I think I want parents to understand you aren't doing anything wrong if you have an opinion, a very strong opinion about what your kid could do. Like we all as parents have very strong opinions about our kids. We have dreams for them that we've been dreaming our whole life. I'm just thinking of a particular example with my youngest son, Christopher. I just knew that he was going to follow the Simkins boy path of he had a beautiful golf swing and he was a great competitor. And I just knew he was going to be a collegiate golfer and that was going to be his path until at 16, he said, I know that I'm talented. I know that I'm good at this, but it's not fun. And I don't have that. It's not my dream for myself. And I just remember going, but this dream is so real to me. And I can see your future and I've already planned it out. And this is how I'm planning to get you in college. Now what are we going to do?
I'm invested in this.
And I had to pull back. So I want parents to know when they're listening to this, that these are just honest conversations that we all have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I really give the Soul-u-tions Lab a lot of credit for the work and the growth that I have had, because as we talked about earlier, it is in the practice. It's not just in the consumption of these ideas.
Yes.
And in the lab, we actually look at the data and we start to experiment with it. And it has been in my own experimentation that I have made so many changes in my life. And I'm actually able to say, hey, I'm not really neutral here.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I want to be.
Yes.
It's okay. I'm not going to push you.
Right.
I fully see that you have your own life, but I'm okay.
Yeah.
Just saying I'm invested in your future.
Mm-hmm. I'm invested in your future. Let me just pull it back to that place, right?
Yeah. And say, and often I've said, have you talked to your coach about this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because even I was thinking about, like, you just had that wonderful exchange right before we started recording,
right,
where son number 1 calls and says, I have more good news.
I know.
The thing that I loved in that moment was, that's fantastic. And you were able to say, I'm so happy for you. I'm so proud of you. So earlier,
right,
as I'm driving here, I had a coaching call in the car on the way to Augusta. And I had a client who said to me, hey, I have some great news. And I'm like, oh, great. Tell me all about it. And so he tells me his news. And I'm like, okay, now how does that fit in with the future plan you have? How is that going to change?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the different path that we set forward. Last week, you said you were going to do these tiny 3 steps. Okay, now this is great to know. Which one of the steps helped create this? And now what do you want to do with it? Such a different exchange than you just had that with your son,
right,
who just wanted a mom to be like, of course, I'm so proud of you.
I'm so proud
Let's
of
celebrate you.
Well, and I want to, because as you were saying that, I want parents to know, like, you may say, well, I ask my kid those exact same questions that Elizabeth just said, like, oh, now how does this fit in? But when I ask them that question, they get a little defensive, or they don't roll with me, or they misunderstand where it's coming from. And I wanted you to share, like, that's the power of having a coach. You don't have a history,
correct,
to overcome with that kid. Like,
and they're not looking for my approval.
They're not looking for your approval.
They don't. I mean, that's not part of the relationship. So oftentimes what I'll hear, and I do some of the complaints, but just information that I hear is, oh, I shared this good news with my family, and my mom said, or my father said, well, what's next then? And they interpret that as, instead of a coaching relationship, and that's the natural next step, is to talk about how we move forward with this. They say it's not enough.
Yeah.
They think, oh, my parents didn't think this was enough. Whereas all they wanted was exactly what you gave your son, which was, I am so proud of you. This is fantastic. Yay, you.
Yay, you.
I love you. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
That's all he wanted. And he probably hung up and went,
she celebrated. Yeah. Like, they really wanted it, like parenting in that age group, they want you to celebrate with them, not problem solve with them, or help them think like 5 steps ahead, or let me bring this back.
They want you to be present right in the moment, from what I hear. And they want also, the other piece that they want is for you to say, I know you can figure this out.
Yeah.
I know you have the tools. You have skills, you have tools. I know you can figure this out. How can I help you?
Right.
That's, I think, most often when I say, okay, well, what would you like to hear? What do you need?
Yeah.
And that's what I hear.
So that's something I think as parents that we think we assume that we know what they need.
Right.
Right. As my tax law professor said, you know, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me, right? Like, so that's
my dad had the same professor.
I think he did. But it's always good. I always have to remind myself that. And then one that I've been saying a lot, because just in this exchange, and I want to share this with our listeners too, like when you're thinking of action items, we are talking about a parent-child relationship. You may not have kids, or you may not have kids in the 20s, but there's something in this conversation that we were just sharing that's just about people in any relationship.
Absolutely.
Any relationship.
I know. I have relationship with lots of people. I am not a 20-year-old daughter anymore.
No.
And I still want my 81-year-old mother who just to say to me, I'm so happy for you.
Right.
I knew you had those tools. Good. Yay, you.
Yay, you.
Let's celebrate you. I still want it.
You still want it, right? Or then I'm thinking about a conversation where somebody who wants to just jump in and they assume there's something needs to be fixed or there's something on the other side of it, right? Like you want to say, just take a beat.
I didn't call. I didn't bring this up.
I didn't bring this up.
Because I needed an action list.
Yeah.
I just needed to talk.
I just need to
put it out there. My brain's been solving for this for the last 10 minutes. Yeah. I just needed to think out loud.
I just needed someone to listen.
That's actually it.
Don't you think?
Yes.
You just need someone to listen. And so I'm thinking like, oh, that shows up for me a lot in my marriage, both ways. He's quick to like jump in or I'm quick to, jump in. And we just had a conversation over 2 weeks ago about something involving one of my other sons. And I had to say out loud in my brain, out loud, not out loud here. It was just like, do no harm, Tara. Do no harm here. Don't just keep your mouth shut. Like, I know you want to reach over and absolutely strangle that person right now. And I'm going to say that I'm, in all fairness, like, there are many, many times where I am sure he wants to strangle me. So that's not I'm better than. It's just the real life.
It's a mutual strangling.
It's just a mutual, strangling feeling is just normal in marriage. But when you can tell yourself like something like do no harm, if maybe I should just listen. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should just listen. And maybe I'm not just listening for them. I may just be listening for me in that moment too, like listening to what's coming up for me, how strong of a reaction this is kind of bringing up in me, or as in a previous episode for people on marriage, I'm going to refer you to the one with Siobhan.
Yes, she's amazing.
She's amazing, Dr. Perrott, and she calls it like a tender spot. Like,
right.
That's a tender spot in me, or noticing on the other side, I might have hit a tender spot in him or her. I think the more that we begin to acclimate ourselves to what works for coaches in our conversations with our clients, but how we bring those back and apply them in our real life relationships. Right. Everybody can take this from us, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean that, and also in a conversation, just like between the two of us, right, as we're both talking, how am I reacting? Where am I feeling this in my body? Mm-hmm. When you were talking about, actually, it was me that brought up the happy thing for your son.
Yeah.
Like I felt a little emotion in my body and I just had to put my hand on my chest. Mm-hmm. And I just, and how tender can I be with myself in these moments? Mm-hmm. I think that's just reflected back. The more I apply this for myself in my own life and my own walk, it's reflected back in my interactions with other people. Yeah. I give them so much more compassion and grace. It's like there's a direct correlation between what I give myself and then what I offer everyone else. Yep.
All right. So I'm looking at our time.
Yep.
There's so much more I want to talk to you about.
I know we could do this forever.
Right. Okay. So what I'd like to do is wrap up this episode and then share with everybody that we're going to do a series of conversations together.
Yes.
And so we're going to keep this conversation between us going. And what is a way in the meantime for people, they've met you on the podcast for the first time.
They've heard my voice.
They've heard your voice. They can see you on the YouTube. Tell them how they
can get a hold of me.
Yeah.
Okay. The best way to find me is I have a website. IhiredAcoach.com.
I love that name.
Well, it was the response. People would say, oh, yeah, I noticed you made changes in your life. You seem so much happier. And they'd say, oh, I hired a coach. And it was actually, I love this full circle moment because I said that about you.
Mm-hmm.
The changes happened in my life when I hired you as my coach. So that is my website. That's where I can be found.
Yeah.
Email me.
Email you. And
I'm easy.
They can, just
it's very easy.
Very easy to get in touch with her.
Yes. And, the other place you can find me is in the Soul-u-tions Lab.
Oh, yes, that's true.
I'm there as a participant, and once a month, I coach for a week.
You do.
If you have that inkling, I will tell you, the first time I heard of life coaching was 2012. That inkling was there. I was drawn to the work, and I just picked up the phone and I called Tara and I said, I want to know more. And if you have that, the Soul-u-tions Lab is great entry point for you to really explore that and start to pay attention to it.
It's so true. It's such an easy, accessible, like I like to say, for the price of a bottle of Whispering Angel.
Right?
A week.
It's even less than Whispering Angel. I just bought a bottle. It was a little more.
It's so funny. Okay, well, the doors are going to open. We just finished fall enrollment in the Soul-u-tions Lab, so we just welcomed in new members yesterday, which was really fun.
It's really fun, yes.
Yeah. So they're going to open again on December the 26th and be open from December 26th to January the 2nd. So mark your calendar and make sure that you go to tarasimkins.com and get on the wait list, and you'll be notified. Okay, so we're going to wrap this one up.
Yes, ma'am.
And thank you so very, very much.
This was so fun. Thank you, Tara.
I mean, she lives in Washington, D.C. now. So to get her in Augusta, it's just such a pleasure. And I just...
It's nothing like being able to see you in person versus the Zoom land that we normally see one another.
I know. It's true. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk next time.
'Cause I ain't done living the life I'm meant to lead. And I ain't done loving the ones who cared for me. The hope and the strength and the love and the smiles and the laughter of friends and family. Add it up, you'll find no limit to the possibilities. The left and the right and some faith in the fight, and your courage is all